Husband's been secretly working on a new identity to start over with his mistress in another state, and if you've never felt your own name tilt under your feet like a loose floorboard, let me be your cautionary tour guide. I'm Mara, I'm 32, a pediatric nurse who can find a vein in a toddler's arm on the first try and still forget where I left my coffee. And I swear to you I wasn't snooping that Tuesday night when the truth blinked at me from a spreadsheet named utilities.xlsx. I was just trying to pay the gas bill. That's it. The portal was down on my phone. My shift had run late because a 5-year-old with pneumonia needed breathing treatments timed to the rhythm of Baby Shark. And all I wanted was to keep heat coming out of our vents and not think about anything except whether we had enough eggs for Wednesday. My husband, Cal, is the organized one, color-coded folders, passwords saved inside a password manager with a password I never fully remember. He'd said, if you ever need anything, it's in the gray folder on the desktop. So I clicked the gray folder. I expected PDFs and the smugness of autopay. Instead, a spreadsheet winked open and a tab at the bottom said Montana, which was confusing because we live in Ohio and neither of us skis. The sheet wasn't utilities. It was a life. Address, 114 Blue Larkspur Road. Renter's insurance paid through December. Cell plan, secondary line added, A. Quinn. A car lease in a name I did not recognize with Cal listed as co-applicant. Then a doc named Forms. I opened it and there was my husband's face pasted into a blank template for a state ID, but the name under it read Jonah Quinn. Something inside me sat down hard. I touched my own cheek like I could check whether my name was still attached. I told myself not to panic. I told myself that could be a good explanation, like identity theft or some elaborate prank from his friends, the ones who think April Fools is a personality. I also told myself you don't get renter's insurance for a prank. My nurse brain, the one that has triaged chaos at 3 a.m. with coffee breath and a prayer, kicked in. Assess scene. Check vitals. Do not hemorrhage. Cal was at the gym. He would be home by 9, shower slick and nonchalant. I could wait and ask him like a mature person who believes in asking before accusing. I could. I stared at the screen for 3 minutes, which felt like steeping in my own heartbeat. Then I typed the address into a map. Blue Larkspur Road was a quiet street in Bozeman with charming crime statistics and 3 coffee shops within walking distance. My husband has always measured life by proximity to good coffee. Street view showed a newish complex with cheerful mailboxes. I zoomed until the pixels made me seasick. A neighbor's dog looked like he was about to tell me something and decided against it. I called my sister. Lila, I said, my voice too even, if I sent you an address in Montana, would you tell me I'm being dramatic? Have I ever told you that, she said, which is how I knew she loved me. I read her the spreadsheet highlights, and there was a pause so long the line felt like a bridge. Meh, she said finally, soft and sharp. Do you want me to come over? Yes, I said, even though it embarrassed me. I want you here when my world changes shape. When she arrived, I had lined up everything I'd found in a row on the kitchen counter. The laptop with its sinister tabs, the envelope of mail Cal had brought in and left unopened. I shook them, they mostly sounded like coupons. My stethoscope because I kept thinking I could listen to the truth like it was a chest. Lila skimmed. She is an attorney who can unearth contradictions with tweezers. This is not identity theft, she said, pointing to a document where Cal no Jonah had signed for a P.O. box. Identity theft doesn't pay deposits. Okay, I said, and then my throat tried to close. We didn't cry. Not yet. We did what women do when their insides are wailing, practicalities. Lila opened his email. I gave myself a pep talk, nurses read charts full of strangers' secrets. I could read my husband's inbox without fainting. There were messages from banks I'd never seen, a flight confirmation to Bozeman with a return flight 3 days later, and a folder called Consulting, which is laughable because Cal can barely fix our IKEA furniture without threatening to move into the yard. Inside that folder, invoices to a marketing firm, the firm where A. Quinn worked according to her signature. Her name was Ava. Even typed, it was pretty. I clicked on a thread labeled Utilities Questions. It was banal, move-in date, parking permits, trash day. But there it was again, we'll be under Quinn by the end of the month. We. The garage door opened. Lila closed the laptop in one smooth motion like a surgeon snapping off gloves. She looked at me the way she did when we were kids and I fell off my bike and broke my wrist and kept laughing because I was scared. "Breathe on purpose," she mouthed. Cal came in smelling like clean laundry and machine oil, hoodie tugged half over his head, grin already half-formed because he always preps it for us. He stopped when he saw Lila, because surprise is visible when you weren't expecting a witness. "Hey," he said, cautious. "What's up? Everything okay?" I said, "Tell me who Jonah Quinn is." He froze. "You think you know how guilt looks? You imagine cartoon sweat beads, darting eyes, defensive blurts. You don't expect the smallest sag at the corner of a mouth like a curtain giving up." He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't stall. He leaned back against the door and closed his eyes like he couldn't hold them open in the gravity of it. And then he said very quietly, "I've been an idiot." "That's a category," Lila said. "Define." He opened his eyes and looked at me, and if I live to be 90 and my bones are thin as secrets, I will still remember the precise shade of sorry they were. "I thought," he said, and then he shook his head at his own myth. "I told myself I could compartmentalize. I told myself I could be me here and someone else there and no one would have to get hurt. I told myself it was a plan, not a betrayal." "What was the plan?" I asked, calm as a chart note. "Move to Montana. Start over. New job." Ava had a line on something. "New name, just a version of mine, a middle name my grandmother used for me, Jonah, and Quinn is her last name. Not to disappear. Just not to be this me." He swallowed. "To be the me who didn't screw up. The me who didn't freeze when you brought up kids and didn't feel small when you were better at the mortgage math and didn't spend nights doom-scrolling other people's versions of happy. I wanted to start fresh. With someone who didn't know the worst parts of me." His laugh was empty. "And in doing that, I chose the worst version anyway." "I'm right here," I said, not loud but enormous. He nodded. "I know." Lila tapped the counter with one red nail. "How far along is this fantasy?" "Leases signed." He flinched. "Holding deposit only. I fly out end of the month to finalize." "I haven't. I didn't know how to tell you." He made a helpless noise that made me want to both hit him and wrap him in a blanket and set him in a chair titled Consequences. I kept waiting for a sign to stop. "There was a sign," I said. "It was the fact that I exist." Silence. The kind where your refrigerator hum is suddenly a Greek chorus. I pressed my palms flat on the cool counter to keep from floating. "Do you love her?" I asked, because drama only makes things take longer. A direct line saves lives. He thought too long, the same fatal pause men deploy right before telling you it's complicated. "I love how she makes me feel like a blank page," he said. "I love that she doesn't know me yet. I love the fantasy." He looked at me. "I don't love her more than I love you." "That's not a unit of measure," I said. "This isn't a bake sale." He nodded. "I know. I'm not going to perform falling apart for you," I said, because the performance would center him and I was unexpectedly greedy for the spotlight of my own sanity. "We are going to proceed like a code blue. I ask questions. You answer. Lila writes it down. If you lie, I call a time of death." "Okay," he whispered, and the relief on his face made me nauseous. "It is disgusting to be thanked for your competence in the middle of your heartbreak." We sat at the table. Lila opened a legal pad. I asked. He answered. "How long?" 8 months since a conference in Denver where Ava laughed at one of his jokes that I've heard 1,000 times and somehow in her mouth it became new. "How many trips?" 5, hidden under a slop of client meetings. "Where's the money?" 2 new credit cards, balances manageable but viper quiet. "Who knows?" 1 friend, Brady, whose advice is a fire that looks like warmth. "What would you have told me?" He stared at his hands and said, "I was going to write you a letter." Lila made a sound that could have sliced bread. By midnight, we had a timeline and I had exactly zero interest in sleeping next to him. Lila texted her boyfriend and he came to scoop her, no questions asked, because good men are a renewable resource if you look where women are safe. Cal asked if he should go stay with Brady. I told him to sleep in the guest room because I wanted to be the one with the home field advantage. Before he went down the hall, he turned in the doorway like a man halfway through a ghost story and said, "Do you want me to cancel the flight?" I stared at him. "You want points for not relocating under an alias?" "No," he said quickly. "I want to know what you need me to do to not make this worse." He swallowed. "Besides invent time travel." "Delete her," I said. "All of it. Cancel the flight. Email the landlord. Call the bank. Move the money back. Give me every password. And tomorrow you call our couple's therapist. And then you call a therapist for yourself because whatever hole you're trying to fill with fresh mountain air needs a specialist." I exhaled slowly, feeling the edges of my lungs like a room drawn in chalk. "Also, you make a list of everyone whose reality you bent to keep this going: Brady, your boss, your mother if she covered for you, and you tell them the truth and you ask them how to make it right. And you accept that their advice might include the word leave." He nodded like a person being handed a medical instruction sheet. "Okay. I'm not promising forgiveness," I added. "I'm promising process. Those are different planets." He nodded again. "Okay." He slept. I didn't. I lay there with the ceiling fan carving the air into quarters and thought about identity, how nurses wear badges with their faces on them so strangers can call them by name, and how my husband had made a new badge for himself like he was a character choosing a skin in a video game. I thought about the time I caught a medication error before it reached a patient because something in my body knew the milligrams were wrong even though the numbers almost matched. I thought, my body has known something was off for months. Every time he looked at the horizon in a restaurant. Every time he kissed me and then glanced at his phone like it was a confessional. The human body is an instrument. Mine had been playing warning notes I ignored because I wanted the song to stay easy. Morning made coffee and reality. Cal sat across from me with red eyes and the expression of a man whose favorite alibi had died. He slid his phone over, opened to messages. He had already texted Ava overnight. "I can't do this. I'm ending it. I'm choosing my marriage. I'm sorry." A simple text, no haikus of excuses. She had written back at 2:11 a.m., "I hoped you'd pick the fantasy. But you're right. I hope you both find what you need." I read it twice, feeling the ache of how we were both foolish and both people. We spent that day in paperwork penance. He forwarded me confirmations: flight cancelled, deposit forfeited, bank accounts closed. He called our therapist and then made an appointment with a guy named Ron who specializes in, as the website charmingly put it, men who blow up their lives. I watched him do it. Not because I wanted to police a grown man, but because I had been the one left out of the room for too long and my feet wanted the tile of control. Lila came back that evening with soup and ginger ale like I had the flu. "Grief is an illness," she said, clattering bowls, "and hydration helps." She hugged me so hard my spine cracked into alignment. Then she looked at Cal and said, "If you ever try to be named Jonah again, I will become a lawyer you see on a billboard." He nodded. "I believe you." We did therapy. It was not a montage scored by acoustic guitar. It was sweat and snot and sentences like, "I interpreted your silence as contempt, and when you say start over, I hear raise me." Our therapist, a woman named Priya with the calm of a lake, made us list the versions of ourselves we were grieving. Cal said goodbye to the man who thought new scenery could substitute for courage. I said goodbye to the woman whose safety hinged on never asking hard questions because she didn't want to be nagging. We wrote those versions letters. We read them aloud. We burned them in a pie tin on the balcony and set off the smoke detector, which felt exactly right. I told friends in a way that honored my story without making him a villain cartoon. "We're working through a breach," I said. "If you pray, pray for specificity." People showed up with lasagnas and recommendations for books and the quiet gift of not saying "I always suspected," because no one ever does and that sentence helps no one. Weeks turned into coordinates. Cal's phone became a glass window. Mine did too, because transparency is a two-person architecture. We created, with Priya's help, a dumb ritual that saved us a nightly 5-minute status as is. Not feelings processed to present well. Just status. I feel resentful. I feel scared. I feel tender and I hate it. I feel nothing and that terrifies me. We didn't fix it in the 5 minutes. We simply didn't hide. Some nights those 5 minutes were the only honest time we had between work and dishes and sleep. They added up like drops. 2 months in, he asked if we could visit his mother. I said yes because refusing would be control for sport. At her kitchen table, a shrine to ceramic roosters and recipes written in pencil, we told her the truth in unison, clumsy and unglamorous. She cried, not the showy way but the way that makes tissues small as snowballs. Then she took my hand and said, "Baby, if you stay, let it be because you see him, not because you can't imagine yourself without him." I put her sentence in my pocket like a talisman. 3 months in, I found the folder again, the one on the desktop. I'd left it there on purpose, a test I was giving both of us. It was renamed Money. Inside, utilities, actual ones. I laughed and cried in the same exhale because trust returns like blood flow to a numbed limb, painful then warm. Not everything was salvageable. When I closed my eyes, sometimes I saw the fake ID template, my husband's jaw above a stranger's name. We practice living with that image the way you live with a scar. Stop trying to make it disappear, make it part of your map. He started volunteering weekends at a youth center, not because penance had a minimum hour requirement but because the me he wanted to become had to practice in the world. I started taking a ceramics class after the evening shift, hands in clay, remembering that I could make a bowl that held what I chose to put inside it. 6 months after utilities to XLSX tried to end me, we drove to a cabin 2 hours away with no cell service and more stars than common sense. We made a fire with more enthusiasm than skill. On the second night, thunder flung itself across the hills and we sat on the porch under a blanket that smelled like cedar and dish soap. Cal said, "I still feel the itch sometimes. The fantasy. The clean slate." He said it like someone handing me a knife they found in their pocket. I tell Ron. I tell you. It shrinks when it's named. I nodded, my head on his shoulder like a truce. I still feel the ache sometimes. The spreadsheet. The other name. I breathed. I tell Lila. I tell Priya. I tell you. It opens a window when it's named. We didn't pledge forever on that porch. We pledged tomorrow, which is what forever actually is. We chose to keep choosing. If you're reading this with your stomach on the floor and a document open that makes you want to scream and then bake muffins just to have something normal to touch, let me offer you the 3 things Priya said on the day I thought I would split apart. 1. Your partner's choices are not your incompetence. 2. You cannot heal at the speed of their regret. 3. Boundaries are how you keep the good parts of you alive while the injured parts knit. Cal asked me last week what I wanted for my birthday. I said a label maker and a weekend by a lake. He laughed because it was so aggressively domestic, so defiantly UN fantasy. He bought me the label maker. I labeled the gray folder on the desktop real life. I labeled the flower. I labeled the drawer where we always lose tape. I labeled the pie tin 4 burning letters and also pies. When I stuck the little white rectangle onto the tin, his hand slid over mine, hesitating like a question, and I let it stay. Then I pulled it away and handed him the frosting spatula because there was cake to ice and the timer was going off and the life we were still living needed salt.